because we come from communities where the truth doesn't always reach the headlines, but it lives in what we face every day. This is Changing Trends and Times, bringing clarity and context to the issues shaping our lives right now. No spin, no distractions, just real talk rooted in real impact. Now, are you ready to lean in and bring your voices into the conversation? Then, allow me to introduce to you a man committed to asking the questions that matter and breaking it down so we all understand. Your host, Charles King.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of Changing Trends and Times. I am your host, Charles King. Hey, thank you guys for being here. I really appreciate each and every last one of you that have been here to watch our shows, especially this series that we're covering, that's Left, Right, Black, the political parties, and the fight for representation. Today is episode 3. Episode 3 is Coded Language, the Southern Strategy. Yeah, this is a strategy that's been enacted ever since the before the Civil Rights Movement, that's actually moving forward. And it is a strategy that has been used right now up to this day. And so what I want to do with this episode is I want to give you guys the context in the synopsis, but also I want to break down the fact of the actual coded language, what it means and how it was done, and how what we're seeing for today's Republican Party, how they're able to win without saying the words that they've always wanted to say about Black people. So, to start with this synopsis, this is let's go back to 1964. On the evening of July 2nd, 1964, President Lyndon Baines Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act into law before a room full of cameras and dignitaries. It was by every measure a moral triumph, as Johnson reportedly confided to an aide. He confided to an aide moments afterwards, perhaps a political catastrophe. "We've lost the South," he whispered. He was not wrong. The law that guaranteed equal rights to Black Americans also detonated the fragile coalition of Northern liberals and Southern white conservatives that had made the Democratic Party the dominant force in American politics for 30 years. Episode 3 of Left, Right, and Black tracks what happened next. The deliberate, calculated, and ruthless, effective Republican effort to harvest that wreckage. From Barry Goldwater's principled but politically explosive vote against the Civil Rights Act to Richard Nixon's carefully engineered Southern strategy to Ronald Reagan's evocative launch of his 1980 presidential campaign a few miles from where civil rights workers were murdered. This episode follows the arc of coded language in American politics, the way phrases like states' rights, law and order, and welfare queen, and forced busing became a sophisticated political vocabulary designed to signal racial anxiety while maintaining plausible deniability. The episode is anchored by the most candid confessions in modern political history. Lee Atwater's 1981 tape recorded interview in which the Republican strategist mapped in clinical, almost breathtaking detail exactly how the language of race evolved from the explicit to the abstract. By the time we reach to the Willie Horton ad of 1988, the full machinery is on display. This episode does not simply tell the story of the Republican strategy, it also interrogates the Democrats own complicated dance with black voters, the moral bargains made on both sides, and what it costs a democracy when electoral victory becomes more important than civic truth. So, ladies and gentlemen, um, what's going to happen here in this episode is I want to make sure I tell you guys exactly from the civil rights movement up to now. Please forgive me for that. How this goes and what was taking place. So basically, let me just set the scene for you. Remember in the last episode when I was telling you guys how the parties switched. The Republican Party was strong at this time. This is in Reconstruction. The Republican Party was strong because it had full black support. Everything about what was happening was there. So what happened is after Reconstruction, up until 1877, where the country was pretty much, especially the South, was ran to near perfection. I mean, everything was smooth. It was under black leadership. This includes even the very first black senator to ever be sworn in. The first senator to be sworn in was a black man. But at any rate, they're on the Republican side, the black people are. And the Republican Party is building its nexus in not only, bringing America close to the brink of being a real democracy. Now, as it's been doing that, we have to make sure that we've got to make sure we stay on the point of knowing that this is when, the equal rights and things of that nature are just flowing. Everything is going well. Well, you had these white people that decided that they did not want that because they felt like they were so much better than black people. Now, what has happened? This is wild. What has happened is we go to the point that they're killing politicians. They're doing all these lynchings. Everything that's done to overthrow the government, they've done an insurrection. With this insurrection, this caused the parties to switch. The Republican Party that included the majority black moved over to the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party moved over to the Republican Party. This is where we sit today. So in that whole thing, when that takes place, what we have is the Democrats now are trying to be not just liberal, but they're doing what they have to do in order to survive and to stay afloat. In this process, what we find is that most of these folk that's in the Congress and the House, in the Congress and the House and the Senate, they're actually they're going at their debates and they're moving with, they're like total opposites. So in the process of being total opposites, we get to this point now where we get up to the 60s where we have in 1964 the Civil Rights Act of 1964 being passed. So when the Democrats did this under Lyndon Baines Johnson, This was a good thing because it needed to happen. But he instantaneously makes the statement that they've lost the South forever. Comes to find out, what he was saying is true, because that is exactly what happened. They lost the South forever. That's from that act passing in 1964 up till today, because your Southern whites have got this thing about losing the Civil War that makes them think that they can create their own world and their own land, which is what is happening with them today. Now, with that being said, this is turning out to be one of the worst things that could have ever happened. So, what happens here is I'm going to give you the historical background and the research on how this takes place. But as I tell you how this takes place, I just want you to make sure that you're following me, because it all comes down to when we say this coded language and the Southern strategy. They was doing things without I'm talking about the Republican Party. They're doing things that not only are unthinkable, but they are actually at the point of they're at the point of, really all about taking away every right. If they possibly could, they're wanting to take away every right from Black people. So we're also going to tell you in this context, in this research as well, as to how the actual Democratic Party of today, that's from then up to now, that needed and have the support of Black people, but have never actually went all in order to make things where they should be. So as we go to this historical background and this research, okay, we call it, this is called the political earthquake. And this is with LBJ and the Civil Rights Act and the rapture of the Solid South. Okay, for nearly a century following Reconstruction, the American South was the exclusive political property of the Democratic Party. The so-called Solid South was not a matter of ideology, it was a matter of memory. Southern whites had associated the Republican Party with Abraham Lincoln, federal troops, and the humiliation of Reconstruction. Democrats, by contrast, have been the custodians of Jim Crow, of segregation, of a racial order that white supremacists or white Southerners understood as natural and good ordained. This was the foundation upon which the Democratic Party built its national majorities, an uneasily, deeply hypocritical alliance between Northern liberals and Southern white conservatives who agreed on almost nothing except the necessity of keeping Black Americans in their place. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 and Voting Rights Act of 1965 blew that foundation apart. Lyndon B. Johnson understood the political cost intimately. His aide, Bill Moyers, later recalled that on the night of the Civil Rights Act signing, Johnson pulled him aside and he in hushed tones, acknowledged that the Democratic Party had likely surrendered the South. The exact words have been debated, that is by historians, but the political prognosis was not the Democratic Party embrace of Black civil rights would unravel the Solid South, and somebody else would have to be their pick of the pieces, to pick up the pieces. So in other words, what we got here is when Lyndon Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act in 1964. What happened then is that white Southerners were not happy about that. And so, just give the context, Lyndon Johnson was from Texas. And so he knew that going into signing of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, Voting Rights Act of 1965, what was going to happen is that Southern whites would totally turn against the Democratic Party forever. And by doing that, what that means is that there was nothing, not one thing they could possibly do would change the minds of these people and how they acted. Because for them, nothing was going to work but to have Black people have no rights, that is, from voting rights to any other rights that they had. They were not supposed to have them according to the Republican Party. And again, I want you guys to know this is after the switch, because now we're in the civil rights era. So in the process of doing this, what we find is that not only did this turn out to be one of those things that would lead to bad feelings, but it would lead to more of a fight than you can ever imagine. So we're going to start this out with Barry Goldwater and his opening salvo of 1964. Barry Goldwater, the conservative Arizona senator who won the 1964 Republican presidential nomination, was not a racist in the traditional Southern sense. He had supported civil rights legislation early in his career and had integrated the Arizona Air National Guard, but Goldwater had a libertarian theological commencement. But Goldwater had a liberation ideological commitment to limited federal government that led him to vote against the Civil Rights Act in 1964. Arguing sincerely, most historians believe that it represented unconstitutional federal overreach into private business decisions. The consequences of that vote, however sincere, were profound. Goldwater lost the general election to Johnson in a historic landslide, but he carried 5 Deep South states: Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and South Carolina. That had been reliably Democrats for generations. His electoral map was a preview, a ghostly outline of what the Republican South would eventually become. It also sent a clear message to stop GOP strategists about not doing the political strategists about policy positions resonated with white Southern voters. Kevin Phillips, who would later become Nixon's chief electoral architect, was paying close attention. So Barry Goldwater is the one that actually sparked this thing about the coded language and the words that were being said, without having to say those real words. But the thing is, he said those real words because he was really upset in the beginning. And when he said those things, he totally changed, transgressed, and went into something else. And it was on and popping. And now you've got this language that's being used today because the playbook is still in play right now. This is what they're doing today. And this is from way back in 1962, 1963, 1960. Okay. And when it goes up to 1964, as we keep mentioning, it's because not only was that legislation passed that did the not freedom, but it did a lot when it came to rights for Black people. This is the thing that made these folks, especially in the South, highly, highly upset. And so this is what Richard Nixon used. And which is why he's actually being called the actual Nick book. For what's happening today is what they call it, Nick's book. And he just took this and actually won a presidency back to back. And so Richard Nixon's 1968 presidential campaign is where the Southern strategy was formally engineered. The political landscape was extraordinarily volatile. Martin Luther King Jr. had been assassinated in April. Cities had burned, and the Democratic coalition was fracturing over both civil rights and the Vietnam War. George Wallace, running as an independent, was scooping up white Southern votes with undisguised segregationist fury. Nixon's challenge was to capture Wallace's voters without sounding like Wallace. So I don't know how many of you are not familiar with Richard Nixon, but Nixon was actually doing some of the strangest things that people could have ever imagined. And this playbook was enacted and it was played out just perfectly. It was done in layers. And in the layers that it was done, not only did it fracture the Democratic Party, but it actually put a lot of onus, on Black voters. And, which was not just a trying time, but it was something that was really real. And it was something that really made people feel very, very uncomfortable. So his strategist, Kevin Phillips, provided the blueprint. In his 1969 book, The Emerging Republican Majority, Phillips articulated the strategy with remarkable candor. The Republican Party's path to sustain national dominance ran through the white South, and that path required speaking the Southern racial resentments through the language of federalism, law, and order. So this is where law and order comes from. This is where states' rights come from. This is where, busing, all of these good things. And these are terms that were being used consistently because it's saying that this is being catered down and advantages are given to Black people, and Black people are just not worthy of whatever it is that they have because they're like not doing what they can do. And they just feel like people have to give them a handout. It's just all kind of little negative connotations that they use. But the man that started all of this, that really got this kicked off, was Lee Atwater. And Lee Atwater, the mechanics of the dog whistle. This came to open up primarily in 1981. No document in American political history lays bare the mechanics of the Southern strategy more nakedly than a tape-recorded interview conducted in 1981 by political science professor Alexandra Lamis with Republicans cooperative Lee Atwater. Atwater, who would go on to run George H.W. Bush's 88 campaign and become chairman of the Republican National Committee, spoke off record, a condition that was lifted by Lamis after Atwater's death. The recording reveals a man describing precise and almost clinical language, the deliberate evolution of the racially coded political message. So what he says, what Lee Atwater says, and he's using the words here in the beginning, is that you start out in 1954 by saying nigger, nigger, nigger. These are Lee Atwater's words, not mine. This is what he said in the interview. Okay, this interview was done in with Alexander Lamis, who published this in Southern Politics. Okay, and he started out by saying nigger, nigger, nigger. By 1968, he says you can't say nigger, nigger. That hurts you. It backfires. So you say stuff like forcing, busing, states' rights, and all that stuff, and white people understand that dog whistle. So this was the whistle for white people to understand that the Republican Party is listening to you. So I want you guys to pay close attention to your politicians today, those that are running these campaigns, because they use this language. And when they use this language, this is where we all should be calling this out. Because when they start saying that stuff about states' rights and the forced busing, and the welfare queen and all of those things, we have to call that out, because that's exactly at the moment that it has to be called out. Letting it go days and weeks afterwards, I don't think that's the time to call that out. Because if you've let the moment get away, there's no way they're going to be held accountable for that. And that's what they're counting on. So, as the campaign season is over with, and they're taking folk back to where they have to go to. This right here turned out to be one of the most craziest moments, but it also turned out to be a turning point in Republican political history, because now they're using these terms, and like from Ronald Reagan, when he launched his campaign in Mississippi, he launched it off that term or that phrase, welfare queen, knowing that he's talking about Black people, and so just in doing that, these are the things that these people are saying, including George H.W. Bush's campaign, where his campaign manager was spoon feeding him all this coded language about Michael Dukakis with the Willie Horton letter. And so as this goes and just keeps shifting, it only gets worse. It does not get better. And so now pretty much every time Democrats were going on the stage to run a good campaign, they were being drugged into this as well, because they did not have the actual animosity that Black people needed. And so with that being said, and we go into what's considered, this breaking point. This is a point that, we have to just think about, and we have to, keep pushing this, and we have to make this be about as worse as it could possibly get. So, as we're doing this, and we're about to get into this first act, before we get into this first act, what I'd like to do is I would like to bring about a new hold on one second for me, please. So I'm having a little bit of a technical difficulty. Okay. We're not going to be able to do this. I was about to bring you guys about a commercial break. But anyway, let me just carry forward with this and go on through to what is considered the earthquake, and that's the Civil Rights Act, and how it cracked the Democratic coalition and realigned the nation. In this case, as we remember back to 1964, and the Civil Rights Act there in Washington, D.C. What we're thinking about now is the way things actually broke down for the party. And when things broke down the way they did for the party was actually at a place or at a point that, you know, its loyalty to the Black majority that it had for its strong support, they never would go all in. And so they wouldn't go all in, but they would only make face as to their feelings on Black people and the Black coalition. And so as long as they could win wherever they went, they were happy. But it did not say that they would do their due diligence and do what they're supposed to do to work with their key constituents. So what took place is after Lyndon Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act, what took place then was the turn of decades to come. And so once he did that, the blueprint of which is that book that was enacted, it came to life. And when it came to life to put Democrats in the nation on high alert, as a matter of fact, because their whole thing was to destroy and to end the Democratic Party as we know it. So, with this being said, primarily what we're looking at is, that the language that was just being used is just that of derogatory condensation. And what I've decided to not do is a lot of this language, I'm not going to use this language because I don't want to use it, and it seems like it's being sensationalized. But I will just tell you the context of what what folk from the conservative side, the Republican side are saying. These are things that are more than just sensitive to their Black counterparts. They really don't care. So what I am going to tell you is that Johnson did say that they've lost the South for generations to come, which has come to pass, and that is true, because this is after the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And then, Republicans they have never gotten more than 10 to 20% of the Negro vote. And so they need to work a little bit harder to get our vote. They need to work a little bit harder to get our vote. And so as we go to the Voting Rights Act, we can go over here to where Barry Goldwater had to make his derogatory statements. And we also have Ronald Reagan and what his thing was with the welfare queen. So, in other words, what I just want you guys to take from this is that as we are doing this third show, and it's called The Coded Language, I would just rather you guys actually go and just read the blog post on changingtrendsandtimes.wordpress.com. I would really appreciate if you guys would go there and just read the post, because the post is a little bit better than how this needs to be said, because I think this language is it's just one that just don't get it. And most of this, I will tell you, is that there's a lot of sensationalism in this. And I'm just deciding that I do not want to use this in the context in which I can use this, because it's probably going to come off wrong. and it's not about hate. It's not about people feeling just on their P's and Q's and their laurels as to what they think they may know. And what I'm just going to do with this is I want you guys to please just go to the YouTube channel, Changing Trends and Times. Later on this evening, I will put a post in the community post. And what I will do up to this point is I'm going to make sure that each and every document that's dealing with this series from the first 3 episodes, you're going to see where in the post there will say episode 1, episode 2, and this being episode 3. All of the documents will be posted there, and it will show you, let you guys download the documents. And I'm going to ask you, if you would, to please do that. Go to Changing Trends and Times, and please leave your feedback, because this is very important, especially for all of our younger people, and trying to be about as best as I can for them. I just don't think it's right to use some of this language, because I really don't want to use this language. I really don't. And I started out and I did that before, but I do not want to do that. What I will say is I'll just do the community post. I'll post these documents there. I want you guys to take a chance, take your time, go through, and you'll read those when I put the post out. And we can hopefully discuss this in the next week. I appreciate you for watching. I really do. Thank you, Mr. Bryant. Thank you for that. But I hope that you guys do understand that I really would like it if you would go out. I'll put this post out, and I'll even put it out on social media for you guys to go and get this at Changing Trends and Times, the YouTube channel. Just look that up. Please subscribe and just wait for the post. And it'll direct you to where you guys will be able to download these documents from episodes 1, 2, and 3. The final episode is going to be next week, which is the Leverage. It's called Leverage, Black Political Power in the 21st Century. But I'm going to post these documents up, and I want you guys to get those. And please give me some feedback and some comments as to what you're taking from the first 3 episodes. And let's have that discussion. We can do that on air, or we can do it via just chatting back and forth via the YouTube channel. But I would appreciate if you guys would do that. And just give me some time to get these up, and just make sure you stay tuned in the community part of the YouTube channel, Changing Trends and Times. I'm going to go ahead and sign off, and I will speak with you guys next Saturday for the final episode, which is, as I said, is called Leverage, and that is Black Political Power in the 21st Century. That one we can be as forward and as outward as possible, because there is nothing sensationalized about that. There's also no bad language and so forth. It's just straight facts and historical context. I want to thank you guys. I will see you guys next Saturday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, same time. And we will wrap up this series, and I'll give you guys, future episodes going forward after we've concluded with this series. Thank you guys. You guys have a great day, and I will see you guys next Saturday here on Changing Trends and Times.